Today we will be discussing the recent proposal by the FCC to change the net neutrality rules governing internet service providers. This is a fairly complicated issue, although it's not too complicated. The proposed changes is only 58 pages long, and you're probably sitting there saying 58 pages. Remember, healthcare was like 1600. Healthcare is complicated.
Donald Trump even said so. He didn't know it was as complicated as it is.
Yeah. This, while it is complicated and it does affect a lot of people, it's not really that complicated. It can be understood. I'm not sure healthcare can actually be understood by one person, but this particular issue can be. And there are a couple of different major issues that I see, but today we're going to kind of be discussing net neutrality, what it affects, and I just wanted to make one statement. Some of you out there are probably thinking, net neutrality, it doesn't affect me. Yeah, I have internet service, but they provide. If you are using the internet, and chances are if you're watching this video, you're using the internet at some point. If you're using cell phones and you have a data plan, you're accessing the internet through some sort of service provider, net neutrality will matter to you. Will it matter to you immediately on the passage of the law or the rules change? Maybe. Maybe not. Will it matter to you eventually? Yes. So, and I guess we can throw out there, John Oliver has done a little bit on this, so all of you conservatives and right-wingers are going, well, if John Oliver supports it, then I need to be against it. No, you don't. Matter of fact, you need to look at this as a consumer of the internet versus the internet service providers versus the content creators on the internet. There are three separate groups, and those three separate groups each have an individual opinion about net neutrality. So, first, what is net neutrality? I'm assuming most people have a general idea. It comes down to internet service providers are supposed to treat all data going through their network equally. So
That's the current state. That's what net neutrality.
That is what net neutrality is. Data is data. If it's legal content, they are supposed to be treating all legal content going through their network equally. So if they have to slow something down, if their network gets overwhelmed, if they don't have a large enough of a network and they slow it down, then they are supposed to slow everything down. So if you're streaming Netflix, that'll slow down. If you're streaming something from Japan, that'll slow down. If you're streaming something from some startup company from the middle of nowhere that only you know about right now, that'll slow down. So it's basically keeping everything neutral as far as data goes. And the Title II order essentially treats the ISPs as transmission services, not anything else. That, kind of sums up the basis of what net neutrality is. So how is it going to, if they enact these new rules, what are or what could happen? And there's a lot of different things that could
Well, I want to say, if they enact the new rules, net neutrality will go away. Buzzword-wise, some people get confused and think that they want to put in net neutrality. That's currently the current net neutrality is the current buzzword for their attitude towards the situation as it stands. A neutral internet.
Net neutrality is the current legal landscape for how ISPs are supposed to be treating their network services. So if it does go into effect, or if the FCC passes the rules reduction, we're going to, and one thing when I was because I was reading the whole proposal, he kept referencing 1996 rules. But at the same time, they're saying that the internet service, computer services, is changing so much, we can't be looking at old rules to decide how we do things. And yet then he references the 1996 bipartisan rule of an open internet over and over and over. Either the old rules matter or they don't. Because, yes, from 1996 to now, the internet is a completely different landscape. I mean, it
Access
is,
to it, options, the ways delivered, different entirely. Yeah. I mean,
the public's reliance on it, the public's use of it. I mean, there are places you cannot get a job now unless you have access to the internet. They do not take paper formed job applications.
yeah.
So either you go to either you get access to the internet through your local library, through your home, or you just don't apply there.
Mm-hmm.
And email is how they tell you that you have an interview or a text. They may or may not call you.
And it's another important thing here to note that net neutrality, as it currently stands, also affects wireless phone access as well. That's something that is even more and more coming along. For people with a concept about email not necessarily being tied to a computer like you're watching this here, but people checking in on their phone, it's also access, and your internet provider actually is also involved in your wireless access. And Jason has just been attacked by Darth Vader. So,
It does. A matter of fact, there's a lot of different things with the wireless internet service providers were trying to get themselves, especially the smaller companies, were trying to get themselves out from underneath the requirements of the current net neutrality rules, because they are servicing smaller communities and they need more flexibility to service the smaller communities. And there were a lot of different things. The one paragraph that I read, or the one thing that, when he kind of came out with it, is none of the companies, because the biggest issue that everybody seems to have with it is companies, the ISPs, the internet service providers, are going to restrict or throttle or slow down particular companies' data streams unless they either pay a ransom or pay a fast laning fee, or you can consider it pay a ransom. Or if a competitor to one of their non-ISP services comes in, well, they're going to slow them down too. And the report is saying none of the companies at this time plan on doing that. So we don't need to have the rules in place to prevent them from doing that, since none of the companies plan on doing that right now. And my question is, if they don't plan on doing it, then why does the rule matter? Leave the rule, and then when they do it, go, hey, wait a minute, you said you wouldn't do this.
I kind of equate that to, this is a funny and interesting thing. Wolves are not currently eating the chickens in your house, in your chicken hen house. They're not there right now, so you don't actually need to put the fence up until after they've eaten all your chickens. And so it's like,
well, I'm even a little bit more. I am quite certain that when the ISP is saying right now they don't plan on doing it, they might very well be serious. But network usage, the demand's going to increase. They're not going to be, they're looking to maximize profits, so they're going to maintain their network, but are they going to invest more in the network to get higher speeds, or are they just going to try to maintain it enough to keep where it is? And that's all going to be return on investment. Which one is going to give them the most money? How are they going to get money they invest paid back to them? So,
well, it's something I like to point out, that you could look at this as, I mentioned, we talked about this, there is not a lot of competition.
That is a separate point, and we will get to that later. I want to finish my thought right now, though.
Oh, okay.
So they're going to invest, whether or not they invest in their networks is all return on investment. They're going to put as little as they can to get maximized. So as demand increases, and all of a sudden demand exceeds their network capabilities, yeah, they don't plan on it right now, but when demand exceeds their network capabilities, they're going to go to these companies and go, hey, let's talk about fast laning now. So, I mean, it will be something that they will do. Are they planning on doing it right now? No. But it will be a revenue stream that becomes available. It will be an option, and eventually somebody will make the decision to do it. Unless we leave net neutrality in place and we don't let them.
But I think you're kind of being a little nice. I mean, my view of corporations and their attitudes about making profit are much more negative than yours.
Yes.
In this sense,
I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt that what they're saying right now is true, but everybody needs to understand things change, and how quickly they change in this particular market is very quick.
I have a feeling they already have plans in place, because they're the ones who are, let's be honest, who are the ones lobbying for this rule change. It's not you and me. It is these big ISP and telecommunication companies. So they have plans in place to make money off of this rule change.
Yes.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be putting the effort into the rule change process. As you stated, if you're not going to do anything with it, why do you even care about the rule? Well, clearly, they have some kind of plan to make money off of it. That at least seems to make sense. You wouldn't spend money lobbying if you.
They might. There's two major things. One, it's going to remove the network. And two, if I'm reading correctly, it's also going to roll back. It's going to allow them to sell your browser history. So
that's already been done.
That's already
passed that's already passed the House. There's no more privacy anymore. They can sell, ISPs can sell.
Passing the House is.
It's been signed. It's law.
It's law. There's only one company that won't do that. So all the others, pretty much everything you're doing is being sold now.
Yes. Your history on the internet, your internet usage is up for sale and will be purchased by companies who are going to say that it's so that they can help cater to your preferences on a bigger scale, but at the same time, nothing's private.
So what happens is, when does your network history, they can actually start tailoring it to where you don't get to go to sites that you never purchased from. You only get to go to sites where you do purchase. And they can start limiting where you can go and how quickly you can go there.
Yes.
The whole network neutrality, as Chuck has mentioned, the only people really pushing for this is the ISPs, because they're the only ones that will make money out of it. Content providers, it's better for them to have a neutral market. Consumers, it's better for us to have a neutral network. So the ISPs want it, and why do they want it? They want to be able to make more money. Well, how are they going to make more money? The easiest way that they're going to make more money is by charging for fast lanes. Now, well, let's see. So, within the rules and reading through it, why can they not do this now? What allowed the passage of the Network Neutrality Commission of 2015? Why did they say that they can't do it? And it's whether or not you treat ISP as a service provider or you treat ISP as simply a transmission provider. And a transmission provider, they would be a utility. Right. So if you go in to get a tire changed and you buy the tire and you have the labor, those two things are handled separately. Even though you go in and have one transaction and you pay one amount, you pay taxes on the tire because that's a product you're buying. You don't pay taxes on having it installed because that's a service.
Right.
So separating the ISP from the service thing that they do, and there's a sentence that's about 10, 20 words long that explains the difference between the two. But as Chuck and I were discussing, my internet service provider, I don't use any services from them.
Well, neither do I. I mean, I use nothing except for access to the internet. I don't use any of their services.
So
Other
for
than that.
us, the internet service provider is just a transmission provider. Now, the other argument they had is whenever you communicate or whenever you send a file, the network is deciding where it goes, how it goes, and because of that, they're offering a service. You know what? When I mail a letter, I don't know which depot it goes to. I don't know when it goes from my local post office box to where I mail it to.
Right.
I know my local post office box and I know where it goes to. I don't know any of the steps in between. I don't know any of the sorting requirements. I don't know how they sort it, whether it goes by truck, train. Does that mean that they're offering a service, or does that mean that I'm simply mailing a letter?
I think, it depends on how you want to do it. If you want to make money, if you're offering a service, I mean, that's why we pay postage, is to pay all that other stuff.
Well, the other side of that argument is let's look at a power supply. I don't even know where the power comes from. I know where it ends up, my house.
And you pay, basically, you think you're paying, and that's a utility.
That's a utility.
That's pretty much, and I think, personally, the better comparison, or the best comparison for the current state of network, internet and ISP is electricity. It is getting to the point where it is that necessary, or it is one of those things that it's difficult to do without. There are places of the country that don't have it, and people don't like to live there. Not everybody, but I'm just saying, some people live in places, that's fine. But I mean, it's like there are places still in the country that don't have electricity. They've never had it wired in. I've been there. I personally wouldn't want to stay there, but there are people who like to live there, and that's perfectly fine. But for the most part, electricity is a necessity within everything. Internet, maybe you could argue that it's not 100% that case now. 10 years, I think having and this is the important thing, maybe not at your home, but you're going to have some sort of network access.
You're confusing the argument. People aren't going to lose their internet.
Well, no, what I'm trying to say,
my argument
is that I think that internet should be treated like a utility. It really should. This net neutrality makes sense because that treats it like a utility. Everyone should have equal access, and there should be nothing about how that, if you're going to bring it into a place, you have to bring it in across the board. You may be a special. I think it needs to be treated as if it is a utility in that sense. And people think of utilities are things that people have to have. Water, sewer, electricity, stuff like that are regulated as a utility.
Yeah, but that doesn't. That particular argument doesn't quite hold water.
In what sense do you not like that argument for why net neutrality should stay around?
Because you're saying that a utility, because you require it, it can be classified as a utility. That is not at all the argument that they're making. What they're making is it's a utility is whether or not the company, all it does is a transmission. It sends to and from. It doesn't offer you a service above and beyond.
Right. Okay.
And then they're comparing it because even if you go back to that ISP and everything you did was through your ISP and they offered, you didn't have to have a word processor unit because you would go through the ISP and through them you would get your Word documents, your word processor, you would get your spreadsheet processor, you would get, all these different things that you could do. Then, even though they're a utility, even though they're required, they would still not be a utility because they are offering services above and beyond sheer transmission.
Well, is it just offering services? Is that
And
that's the argument they're saying. Just because they can offer it, that makes them not a utility.
No, not because they can offer it, because they do offer it as part of.
Okay.
And as we were discussing earlier, that's not how a lot of people treat their internet service provider anymore. Your internet service provider is pure transmission. Once you have access to the internet, you go elsewhere for everything you do. You don't go to your internet service provider.
You use multiple different.
You don't even use them for an email account anymore.
No.
Everybody goes to Gmail. Everybody goes to
Or Yahoo email. They set up emails through other sites. They don't use emails set up through their internet service provider anymore. That's true. You don't. It's not required, or you don't have to. I mean, I think
one of the other arguments is the network provider, and I'll just because the network filters out viruses and bad things. That is a service that they're offering, so that whenever you do get an email or whenever you do get content, you're supposed to get mostly safe content. And I'm like, well, the water company, I mean, they would love to not have to filter out bad things before they send you water. But they're still
an electric company would like to not have to worry about the level of current that reaches you at any given time. You know, maybe occasionally spikes might happen. Oh well, you know. But yes, they're also, they don't do that great of a job, because if you have a computer and you're not, you know, you have to have antivirus software. Otherwise, you will get hit with viruses surfing through their sites, no matter what they do. So they're not exactly doing an excellent job of it. And if they're filtering on their side of things, they don't really make a big thing of that. I don't even know that they do that. I mean, I know my internet provider, as far as I know, has no.
According to the document I read, that they are doing that, and they are classifying that as a service. And I think it boils down to this: the internet service provider and the content you get on the internet, in a lot of people's mind, is separate now. You go to the internet provider, you get speed. It was humorous when they said customers don't go in and buy a package based on speed and reliability and access to the internet. They buy the package based on the services they're going to get. No, you buy your package based almost purely on your speed.
The model where that you got that as lumped in with other stuff is pretty much going away. I mean, there are you go in and you get the internet only options. There are nothing else, and that options are how fast it is, how reliable it is, what your data cap is. Those are the options you're choosing, and it's purely about what's being provided to you.
It's purely about the reliability and whether or not they can give you this data this quick. And the higher speeds, people want the higher speeds because they want to stream HD videos, or they want to have. Or a family of 4 wants to watch 4 different HD videos at the same time.
Yeah.
I think they should have a little together time as a family, but that's just me.
No, they do, Jason. They're watching them at the same time in the same room on 4 different handheld devices. And passing them around. I've been in that experience.
The fact that there might be some truth to that statement is what I find
I've experienced this. Everybody's watching something on their little handheld device. They're like, "Oh, you got to see this," and they hand it to the next person. They get there, and that's what they're doing. That's their together time. That's their family time, is watching 4 different shows or streaming all kinds of cat videos or whatever
cat
in the living room. But the point was that this. Both of us, I mean, at one point when we were first discussing this, Jason was not necessarily thinking that net neutrality was that big of a deal.
Well, and I'll be honest, I will back him up. When he first said, "Hey, let's do a net neutrality video," I was like, I mean, I'm sure it's important, but is it as important as healthcare? And to some extent, right now, today's market, I would say no. But based on how things have changed over the last 10 to 15 years, you might very well be going to the doctor with the webcam instead of going into the office in 10 to 15 years. That might be how you do the general, I have a cold. Well, let's just...
a little bit here about another aspect of this. I kind of like where we went with that. Healthcare is a big issue right now because we didn't deal with it when we could have dealt with it before it became a huge problem.
Yeah, it started becoming a problem Everyone just kind of kicked.
It
Everyone was
wasn't
saying
that
it's a
big of a
personal
problem.
choice.
This is a situation where we can realize as a group that if we can keep this in place, we'll know what the landscape is. It's a situation where it's important because it's actually we can try to keep it from turning into something to where later on, as you mentioned earlier, initially they're not going to have any changes, but it will happen and it
Yeah.
will snowball. And the thing is, regulating after you've deregulated is not as easy to accomplish.
Yeah, because there will be a lot. Right now, everyone's saying, all the main players are saying, hey, we don't plan on doing any of this. Well, if you don't plan on doing any of this, let's leave the rules in place. Because they will, as soon as someone comes in and starts competing with them on their network with their services, they will do exactly what they're saying they're not
Well,
going to do.
that goes back to my thing. They can say that all they want. So why are they lobbying to make the change? The only reason you lobby to make this change is because you want to make change.
Yeah, you want to have that option. You want to have that particular card in your pocket so you can negotiate with people.
Let's be honest, these companies are huge. They have plans in place for the minute this goes through, the net neutrality gets pulled out, of what they're going to do over the next 3 years, implementing steps and procedures to up their profit margins based upon the idea of fast laning certain services. And then once they have data mined on people with all the other stuff that they can now sell, they can start. There's a lot of levels where they can really play around, and I'm sure they've got plans in place. I mean, it would make sense if I were running the company. I would have a plan in place for it. I mean, that's only the logical thing to do. It's because your objective is that we're running a company is to make money. And
yeah, if you're campaigning, you would have a plan in place. So now this has been a very general net neutrality. One, we both believe that it needs to stay in place, and whether you're conservative or liberal, whether you support business or not, net neutrality protects the consumer from the ISPs. Basically, start fast laning, start doing everything else. It also helps the small, innovative companies. And everybody says we're all about the innovation. We're all about the small company. We're all about the small guy going out with a new idea. Well, net neutrality is the best way to keep that small guy from not having a barrier of entry into the market being so huge. Because that's really what fast laning can do, is the companies can have so much of their network capability committed to the fast laned companies that if you're not able to pay to get into their network, you don't get into their network because your speeds won't be reliable enough to deliver a product to your customer to get them to keep coming back.
And we haven't even talked about the other side, the side where the content providers, not the ISPs, they may have a plan. What they might do is buy up fast lane space to keep it away from other people. They might try to price other people out of the market. It also throttling innovation in that sense, not even on the ISP side of things. Once you allow people to have something like that happen to try to eliminate competition, well, they're going to try and eliminate competition as well. And the ISPs are not going to fight that at all. They're all about making money.
Yeah.
So once they get a bidding war going on for who gets the most access to the biggest portion of their bandwidth, they're just going to let it happen. And where is the incentive then for them to really improve their infrastructure? If they can...
Well, the incentive to prove their infrastructure, there won't be any incentive to get faster speeds. There'll be more incentive to get more customers. Because if they can get more customers, they can show a greater profit on every customer that they connect to. And that was actually one of the things that I was reading that we will discuss in a later episode. Right now, we're kind of reaching the end. This has been a very generalized, very open. In the future, I think that we will do each individual article because there's about 3 or 4 different articles that I was reading that I would really like to discuss in depth about how things have changed.
I would like to say at this point, I'm a big supporter of net neutrality. I was one of the people who sent in a letter the last time this came around when they were putting in the rules in 2014 and 2015 to set up net neutrality. John Oliver called for people to do it. I think you should definitely send into the FCC because the period now is it's up for review.
It's up for
I want to
review.
get 3 to 4 million people again, maybe more, saying that we want to keep our internet access open and and free and net and neutral as it is right now.
Yeah,
we want to keep that.
I disagree with the title of the rules change is restoring an open internet. It's not restoring an open internet. What it is doing, it is giving the power back to the ISPs to decide how best to manage their networks to maximize their profits, not to give the end user the particular product that they're guaranteeing. Because as a consumer, you go in, you buy your speeds, you're not thinking, hey, well, I'll only have this speed with this particular content provider or this speed. You go in and and they're saying, this is what we're going to give you, and you make a decision based on what they're offering. The network neutrality says they have to. It's the same as every other business has rules and regulations that when they make a claim, they're supposed to live up to that claim. Right now, network neutrality is the ISP's rules and regulations saying you have to live up to your claims. We're going to give them back power. And it's power they say they don't need, they say they don't want, and they say they're not going to use. So why should we give it back to them?
Pretty much. So contact people. Do your best to make sure that FCC hears the complaints of the consumer. I'm afraid that it's not going to matter, that this time around, because of this makeup, it won't work, but at least we can try.
You know what? If you voted for a Republican or if you voted for someone who is going to be voting against it or would support it, send a letter to the FCC, send the same letter to your congressman.
Yeah.
Because make healthcare, for some people, this needs to be as important as the healthcare bill.
We'll talk about in later episodes why information throttling, what you can do stuff with like that there's real legitimate concerns there as well as to why this is as important socially as those things.
Well,
it can be.
It can be. And when you're discussing the healthcare, people who have illnesses, people who have pre-existing conditions, people who have all these different issues, healthcare is a major issue. Well, some of your small startups, some of your small business owners, net neutrality is going to be as big an issue for them in getting their company up and off and going as anything else. Because they're not going to be affected by healthcare as much, but they're going to be definitely affected by this. So we're going to wrap this one up with that. As Chuck stated, both of us believe write a letter to the FCC. And if you want to read the entire 58, it's only 58 pages. If you want to read the whole 58 pages and pick a paragraph here or there that you really disagree with, or, hey, I'm all about getting involved. If you completely agree with it, one, I think you work for an ISP, but hey, if you completely agree with it, write in a letter about that too. But 4 million last time, let's try to beat 4 million this time.
Yep.
Any final words?
That's it.
All right.
Contact.